Hello, everybody. This is Jeremiah Craig coming at you with another episode of Ask the Bootmaker. Today, we have a legend on the show, Mr. Mike Vaughn. Thank you so much for joining me today. Mike, how's your day going out there?
Pretty good. Been working for a little while.
Nice. When do you usually start your days? I was talking with Jarrett Van Kuren last episode, and he starts his day at 3 a.m. Are you one of those guys that starts so early too?
Yeah, I've never been much of a sleeper, so about 3.5, 4 hours, and I'm good. So if I doze off early, I start early.
Wow. I wish I could I wish I could function off of 3 or 4 hours. Usually when I only get 3 or 4 hours of work, I try to push through, but man, I end up being so damn grumpy a few hours after work.
If I get 6 hours, I'm give out. It just makes me tired.
Wow. I definitely envy that. So can you tell me a little bit about how you started in bootmaking? I remember us talking a couple of weeks ago that you started when you were 15 years old. How did you get into this at such a young age?
Just by accident, really. I got in a work program class in high school, and I needed a job, and so I had actually worked in a little repair shop in Irving because I took a pair of boots over there to get some repair work done, and the shop was open, and it seemed kind of neat what they were doing. And I guess everybody when they're young gets fascinated with leather at some point in time. And so I asked those guys for a job, and they hired me, and I worked there long enough to figure out they really didn't know that much about what they were doing. They had just bought the shop from a guy who had it for 60 years, and then and that was in the summer. And then when school started, I had to get a job to stay in that class. And so I told my instructor that I'd been doing a little boot repair work. And he said, well, I know the guy that has the shop in town here. He said his son was in this same class 5 years ago. He said, I'll call down there and talk to Jeff and, let him know you've got a little experience and you'd like to come down there and see about going to work. And so when I got out of school that day, Jeff had gone to lunch. And so he neglected to tell his dad that I was coming. And so when I went in there, he come out and asked if he could help me. And I said, well, Mr. Griffith from the high school sent me down here to see about getting the job. And he said, well, I don't know this Mr. Griffith guy, and I ain't hiring nobody. So he wasn't very polite. It's kind of don't let the door hit you on the way out type deal. And so when I went back to school the next morning, he said, how'd it go? And I told him. He said, well, let me call down there and talk to Jeff again. So he did. And I went back the next day. Of course, Jeff was gone to lunch again, and he forgot to tell his dad again. And so when I walked in, his dad come out and he said, boy, you're a persistent little SHIT, aren't you? He said, didn't I run you out of here yesterday? And I said, yes, sir, you did. But Mr. Griffith from the school sent me back down here. He said, well, I don't know this Mr. Griffith guy, but don't come back. And so went back, told Mr. Griffith, and he called Jeff again. He said, well, tell him to wait till I get back from lunch. He said, I'll talk with my dad. And so the next time I went in there, they went ahead and hired me. And
What was it like your third time through? Was it like, sorry for the misunderstanding, or it was just like, that's the way things are here?
no, just kind of one of them glares, and and they were really great to work for, but their Jeff's mom, she worked there too, and she literally did not say a word to me for a month. I mean, not hi, bye, how you doing? I mean, she was livid that they hired me. She was pissed because every time they hired someone, I don't know, they just had a hard time learning it, and so they'd get frustrated and they'd be sent out the door and on their way. And they'd kind of gotten this mentality of, they weren't going to hire anybody else. They just tired of fooling with it. And so anyway, they did. And so Jeff's dad, is the one who did all the teaching with me. And he would just show me things to do, and I could do it. But, back then, that was during the urban cowboy craze. And cowboy boots were sweeping the nation from coast to coast, and there was a lot of work to do all the time. And so, you could get pretty proficient at whatever you were being shown to do, because we would literally back then average probably 22, 25, 26 pair of half soles and heels a day on cowboy boots. And then we would do that probably 18 to 20, 22 pair of soles and heels on men's shoes a day. And then a couple of pair of full soles a day on cowboy boots, and replace those little heel taps on Letty's shoes every single day. So with that kind of volume, it didn't take long to get pretty proficient at whatever you were being shown to do. So
wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. And you don't see shops do that kind of volume really anymore. Most all the boots nowadays are just throwaway boots. I mean, they're junk, and they're really not that easy to fix anymore, because they're made out of a lot of plastic and compressed cardboard and the cheapest material that they can get their hands on. And a lot of them are put together with threaded nails, and it's hard to get them apart, with threaded nails without tearing things up. So factory boots nowadays are just not like they were, 40 years ago.
Is that what the value is with using mainly lemonwood pegs, or the wood pegs, rather than the nails and the soles? Is that because it's all threaded and it's tough to get those out?
No, using wooden pegs to attach your soles and heel bases and stuff like that. You don't when they get wet, they just kind of expand. Nails, the only way for nails to work is they have to go all the way through and clench into that insole. And then every time you take them apart, you're tearing part of that out. And with the leather insole, it's not as damaging as it would be with, those compressed cardboard insoles that they use now. But it's just, and then too, nails rust. And so that tends to eat leather up pretty quick also, as to where lemonwood pegs don't. And just, the pegs were just the old traditional way of doing things before nails ever came along, and they just got into let's make more, faster, cheaper, and get them out the door. And it's funny to me what people will spend on vehicles, but what they won't spend on their feet. Because if your feet hurt, you're kind of a miserable SOB to be around. I hear that all the time. That's why they come to get boots made, because they're tired of their feet hurting. Mm-hmm. So I have to laugh sometimes. I'll get people show up in a $75,000 pickup, and then they act like they get sticker shock at what handmade boots cost. And I'll just look out the shop door and look at that vehicle they're driving. I just shake my head and kind of laugh at them. You got those boots on your feet all day long from the time you get out of bed till the time you go to bed. You're not sitting in that $70,000 vehicle from the time you get up to the time you go to bed. So
that's a great point.
It's funny to me, but those who do, buy handmade boots, they appreciate them, and they like them. So.
It's interesting to me that it seems like the handmade boot process takes so much longer. There's so much attention to detail with it, and the factory boot process, it's a lot shorter so that they can make more money. But I'd never thought about it in terms of repair. It seems like repairing the traditionally made handmade boot is much faster, from what you're saying, than the factory made boot.
No, it's
not necessarily.
No, it takes just as long to put soles and heels on the second and third time around as it does the first time around. You're just not making the whole boot all over again. So I would have to disagree with that point.
I mean, from in terms of repairing the handmade boot from the factory boot. Does it take any longer to repair the soles from your experience, or any other part of it because of how they're produced? Say instead of using a channeled welt or the more nails that are in a factory made boot, does it take longer to repair those factory modern boots than it does the handmade?
No, no.
Okay.
Repairing factory boots is definitely quicker, than repairing handmade boots, because when you're when you're making handmade boots or repairing them, either one, and you're using wooden pegs and stuff. I mean, things have to dry, and with when you nail them soles on, they don't have to dry. They just nail them on and send them down the line to the next person. So and then too, like all your factories, they have some people call them an inside nailer, or some people call them heel wheels. It just depends on how big a place you're in. But the all the heel bases and the rubber caps that are attached on factory made boots, when they buy those heel bases, the rubber caps are already on them, so they actually use those threaded nails and put those in from the inside. And so a lot of times sometimes you'll tear those nails plumb through the insole trying to get those heel bases off, because the insoles are just they're not a good quality, and if you don't tear the insoles out and you do actually get the heel bases off, I mean, you got to cut them threaded nails, because you can't put those heel bases back on that way, so there's there's more than one way to skin a cat, to get them back on there. But very few factory boots are repairable very many times at all. I mean, you're lucky if you get them once.
Mm-hmm.
Very lucky if you repair them once. So, and two, it's really labor intensive. So a lot of people would rather just throw them away and buy a new pair for what it costs to have them repaired. They think they're getting a better value just going and buying a new pair than paying you to repair something that's already broke in and comfortable and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, that's such a shame when that happens, because you can really, I think that's the value of a cowboy boot, or at least a boot that can be repaired, is that it really breaks in once you get on that like second resole. It's just, there's nothing like it, and it takes a while for it to get there, but man, it's worth the wait.
It does. Handmade boots are the same way. I'd just soon take a whipping as to have to break in a pair of brand new boots. I hate everything about it. And I've got a couple of buddies that are, one's a saddle maker, and then the other one runs a bunch of yearlings up in Oklahoma. I mean, they joke with me all the time, send them to me. I'll break them in for you, and then I'll send them back to you. So, and I've done that once or twice.
Wow. Okay. There you go.
I just hate breaking them in. Once they get broke in, they're great. But I'm so tender-footed, I can't hardly walk across carpet without socks on. So breaking in a new pair of boots is just not at the top of my list of favorite things to do. So.
I hear you, especially if it's not the right fit to begin with, and you got to really work on that break in.
Yeah.
So after starting out at that first shop, you then moved over to Letty's. Can you tell me about getting in there and what that was like?
That was another accident, actually. I went home for lunch one day, which I never, ever did, ever. And NBC was doing a story on Clyde and Joe Vasquez, the two brothers who make boots upstairs at Letty's. And just the way the TV interview went, it just sounded like they needed an apprentice. And so I called over there, because we were closed at the repair shop on Monday. So I called over there Monday, and Jim Martin, who was the store manager at the time, answered the phone, and I told him I'd saw the deal that NBC did on Clyde and Joe, and it sounded like they needed an apprentice. And he said, well, I don't generally do this, but I want you to call back tomorrow and talk to Wilson Franklin. He's the man who owns Letty's, and visit with him about it. So he gave me his number that went to his office. And so I called the next day and talked to him. And he said, well, I want you to come over here and show me what you know. He said, because I'm not going to hire anybody over the phone. And so I went over the following Monday, and Joe, the younger of the two brothers, come downstairs because Clyde had already gone home. And he took me upstairs in the shop and walked me through the shop and asked me a lot of questions on how I was taught to do things. And so we went down to Wilson's office, and he said, Wilson, I think this kid will work. He said, he seems to know enough to earn his keep anyway. And so anyway, Wilson told Joe, he said, I'll take it from here. And he said, I swore I'd never hire another kid as long as I live, because all they do is F things up. And he said, but as you can tell, Clyde and Joe are not exactly spring chickens anymore. And he said, I need to get somebody in here to learn this. And so then he kind of pointed at me, and we still joke about this to this day, because to this day, he's got the deepest voice of any man I've ever talked to. And he said, the first time you F up a pair of high dollar boots, the door swings out just like it does in. Do you understand that? And I said, yes, sir. And then he got a big old grin on his face, said, okay, when you want to start? And so that was pretty much my job interview right there. And so I went back and gave my 2 weeks notice to Jack and Jeff. And Jack was not happy about me leaving, because, he felt like he'd put, 2 years into me, and he got to where he was taking off a lot because Jeff and I were running the shop. But on the flip side, he was happy that I was going on and staying in the boot business and continuing, to learn and now to learn how to make them. And he had heard of Clyde and Joe. I mean, he knew their reputation, and he knew they were really, really good. And so on that aspect, he was happy that that's where I was going since I was leaving there. And so I went to work there and worked there 5.5 years and learned from both of them. And I just feel really privileged to have gotten to learn from those two guys. I mean, they were just phenomenal teachers and phenomenal bootmakers. Looking back over 41 years now, of seeing different bootmakers, different guys, listening to different ideas, trying different techniques and so forth. It's I was just lucky. So.
It must have been difficult to pick up everything that they were trying to teach you, because there wasn't any internet, there wasn't any of the technology that we have now, where you could look back on maybe a video or a blog post about how to do a certain technique with top stitching, for example. Did you find it difficult to sort of keep up with all of that that they were teaching you, or did it come pretty easy?
No, it was pretty easy. They could show me what to do and I could do it. Now, I didn't understand it at the time, but as far as being taught how to do it, learning to make boots to me was easy. Learning how to sharpen knives was the most difficult part I went through in the whole process. I mean, I screwed up thousands of dollars worth of knives over the years until I finally got to where I could sharpen a knife.
Luckily, that wasn't in the agreement about messing up a pair of boots.
Exactly. But they were, they were funny. Between Clyde and Joe and the saddle makers that were upstairs at Letty's, I mean, they called me the kid that screwed up the 60-year average. Because everybody there was, except for one, I think, was 62 and older. And here I am, a 17-year-old kid. Coming in there, and so, but, Clyde and Joe both used to tell me all the time, pay attention to what we're showing you, because when we're gone, the knowledge is gone, because this is not wrote down anywhere. You can't go look it up somewhere, you're just going to have to remember it. And so that was, but I mean, it doesn't matter if you're making boots or shoeing horses or building cars, I mean, you learn through repetition. And so, that's just how I learned. But it's funny, now that I've taught a few people, I tried to teach them the way I was taught, and I think only one actually understood that. The rest of them, when I say you adjust the template just a little bit, well, their response, well, how much is a little bit? well, just a little bit, and they were always hellfire and brimstone about, no, I need hard numbers. I mean, I need to know is a little bit of 16th of an inch, a 32nd of an inch, an eighth of an inch. And I'm like, well, hell, I don't know. It's just a little bit. I mean, that's all, and so it's made me, teaching people has made me take those little bits that I was showed and put them into hard numbers. So it's easier for people to understand what I'm trying to explain to them, so. But it, like I say, it wasn't hard. The learning process wasn't for me. I don't know that I ever ran into anything that was, that I had a problem learning. Just time,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, more boots you make, the more you learn, and there's no substitute for boots out the door. So, people who go to these 2-week schools or these month-long schools, I have to laugh. I mean, I don't care what line of work you're in, you're not going to be very good at it at all in 2 weeks or a month. I mean, not only boot making, anything.
Exactly.
That's why people go to school for years, to go to college for years, to become good at what they do.
Exactly.
And if you think you can go to a 2-week school and make 1 pair of boots, or a month-long school and make 2 pair of boots, and think you're a boot maker, I mean, that's just a joke to me. It really is.
Yep, I feel the same way. I had to go through a very similar thing with songwriting. When I started writing songs, I don't know, when I was 18 or so, I wrote dozens, hundreds, and they were all crap. They were all awful until I started to get the hang of it, and then, a couple of years later, I was finally comfortable, playing some of them on stage in front of strangers. Before that was all just family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. It's I wish to this day I still kept my first pair of boots I made, but I didn't. I mean, I don't know, when you're young, stuff like that doesn't really sink in as to, it may have some sentimental value to you one day, but I couldn't tell you where they're at or how long they've been gone.
Where did you make them? At Letty's?
At Letty's, yes. Yes. I'd been there a year before I made my first pair of boots from start to finish by myself without having to ask anybody. And so basically that was, 2 years doing repair, and then another year with Clyde and Joe before I could make my first pair from start to finish and not have to get any help whatsoever.
And did they task you with that, or did you do that in like before and after work, in the times where the machines weren't being used or your skills weren't being used for customers?
After work. I didn't get paid to make myself boots then. I don't get paid to make myself boots now. So
that's what I was figuring the answer was going to be.
Yeah. Everybody has the assumption that I have a closet and a half full of boots, and for the first time in my life, I have 2 pair at one time. I usually just have 1 pair, and I wear them 7 days a week. And then when I have to put new soles and heels on them, I'm in a pair of tennis shoes for a day or two, and then till I get them done, and then I'm back wearing boots. But I do finally have 2 pair now, and 1 pair is out there in the shop getting soles and heels on them now, as a matter of fact. So I do have a backup pair right now.
Awesome. That sort of goes against what a lot of cowboy boot collectors will practice, is they say you need a couple of different pairs and then you got to switch them out every day. Where do you stand on that, with you wearing the same pair pretty much every single day?
Well, I agree with that. I mean, it's I hear this all the time, oh, well, these boots will last me forever. I said, no, they won't. I mean, tell me anything that lasts forever. I mean, they're a whole lot better than what you can buy in the store, and the material's better and stuff like that. But the absolute worst thing you can do is wear them every single day, just because they need time to dry out, and I know that. I mean, I preach that a lot, but there again, I don't get paid to make boots for myself. So I just have to do the best I can. And because if I start a pair of boots for myself, it might be 5 minutes this week or 20 minutes next week, or I may I mean, there may be a month where I don't work on them, but once I start a pair for myself, usually in 10, 11, 12 months, I'm through with them, but it's just, when you got a few minutes here and there to work on them, because there's somebody always calling and pushing, wanting their boots all the time. And so they're the ones who pay the bills. So they're the ones who get theirs before I do.
I respect that. I respect that. Going back to some of the history in your bootmaking career, after you were working at Letty's, you were still really young in the grand scheme of things when you struck out on your own. Can you tell me what that experience was like, and if it was difficult for you to sort of make your own as a custom cowboy boot maker?
It was really difficult at first. I mean, I was 23 when I left Letty's and started on my own. And if I heard it once, I bet I heard it, 500 times. Boy, you're not old enough to know how to make boots that good, But I mean, I started when I was 15 years old. And so when I first started, I was in my boot shop every day, all day. And then I shoot horses after work and on weekends. And then I also loaded and unloaded trucks at Yellow Freight at night, 7 days a week. So I did that for 3 years. And then after that, I had enough clientele to stay busy. So I quit loading and unloading trucks at night, and then just made boots and shoot horses for years and years and years. And not necessarily because I needed to be shoeing horses, but if you're a good horseshoer and you show up, you're going to have horses to work on whether you want to or not. I mean, people will constantly be bringing them to you or want you to come shoe them and stuff. And I enjoyed shoeing horses. I mean, it kept me in shape, but I'm getting to the age now where I don't do enough horses to stay in shape for that anymore. So I'd like to. I keep telling myself I'm going to pay somebody to start shoeing my horse, and then somebody will post a video of their 80-something-year-old dad still out there shoeing horses, and I'm like, well, I guess I can keep doing my own. But yeah, I mean, it was, it was a struggle at first. Because back then you didn't have social media and ways to advertise, I guess, because I don't care where you're at. I mean, unless you're in a huge city like New York or Houston or Austin or something, I mean, no bootmaker survives on local business alone. So for me, I used to go to horse shows all the time because you get people from all over the country gathered up in one place for a couple of weeks. And I would have some sample boots, out there. And at first I would make pairs of sample boots, but inevitably somebody would come along and they'd fit them and they'd buy them. Then I wouldn't have anything to show anybody. So then I just started making single boots, just a right or a left, and unless a one-legged person comes by that likes that boot and that boot fits them, that boot ain't going anywhere, because there's just one. And so, and if you can pick up a boot and look at the quality of it, it's a lot better than just looking at pictures, so that's how I got started, building my client base and stuff. I mean, I never once advertised in a magazine or a newspaper or anything like that. I just went to trade shows, horse shows, and set up at the trade shows and got boot customers that way.
It sounds like every step in your bootmaking career is about persistence. I mean, you showed up 3 days in a row at the first place when you're 15. You just go out on a whim based off of a television program to Letty's. And when you're out on your own, you're hustling with 3 jobs, trying to make it happen. Do you think that that's something that is inevitable to anybody who wants to do custom cowboy boots, or is it just something that people got to remember when they're trying to do their own thing and pursue their dreams?
Well, I mean, you have to be willing to put in the hours, and get out there and hustle. And it's not very easy selling somebody, a $2,500 or $5,000 pair of boots, when they can go buy them for $150 in the store all day long. you know. And so um, you have to hustle. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to make ends meet, you know. Um, the electric company doesn't care if I got boots to make or not, as long as they get their, you know, the electric bill paid every month. That's all they care about. And, you know, truck payments, car, you know, house payments, they're all the same. I mean, they come around every 30 days, whether you want them to or not, you know. And so um, if you don't have enough clientele to stay busy full time, you know, you better be doing something else to fill in the dead times, you know, or the slow times. I mean, it just and I don't care if that's boot making or anything. I mean, I think everybody has a grand business plan when they start, but you know, things don't always go as you um, foresee them to, you know. So uh,
Never.
I mean, everybody I know anyway, unless you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, has hit a bump in the road at one time or another, you know. And what you do when you hit that bump, you know, kind of defines who you are, if you really wanted it that bad or not, you know. So, and I always liked boot making. I mean, I never got bored with it. You know, it was I mean, I look at it like, you know, you get a carpenter who takes a big pile of wood and can build a house. I mean, a man's proud of doing that, you know. And I look at it the same way. I mean, I have a skill that, you know, and I can take a print of somebody's feet and all the measurements and then take a pile of leather and I can make them a really nice pair of boots with that, you know. And um, if it were easy, there'd be a lot of people doing it, you know. And that's the big misconception people run into now. You know, you always heard that surgery, that saying that brain surgery is easy if you know what you're doing. Well, if you know, you get people who see you make boots or see little videos here, there, and yonder, and they think, well, heck, I can do that. You know, that's easy. Well, it looks easy because I've been doing it 41 years. You know, I promise you it wasn't that easy when I started. And, you know, it frustrates the heck out of a lot of people that they come in here and they want to learn to do something and they just can't get it, you know. And I mean, it's not for everybody. It's not, you know. You have to have some hand-eye coordination. You have to be good with your hands. You have to understand what someone's trying to show you, and you have to see the big picture. You know, see, you got to be able to see in your eyes what I'm seeing in mine, you know, the finished product. um, and I'm a stickler about detail, you know, because I had it pounded into me when I was learning, you know. You just uh, you do it right or you hit the door. I mean, and it's funny, my wife gets on me all the time, so you can't talk to people like that anymore. I said, well, why? That's how I got taught. I mean, you know, I mean, the guys I learned from back in those days, they were hard asses. You know, they showed you and they expected you to do it. And if you didn't, then you got sent down the road, you know. Um, so I think that's the big difference between trying to teach people now and those of us who had to learn it back then. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it was a mile away or the highway back then, you know. And they weren't really polite on sending you on down the road if that's where you went. So,
Do you think that the industry has changed any? It seems like between those two places that you went, maybe it wasn't the most polite start to things. Do you feel like the custom boot making world is a little bit more polite now, or is it pretty much the same sort of attitude where it's like you got to earn respect or something like that?
it's different now. I mean, you know, those of us who've done it all our lives that are starting to get a little older, I mean, we realize that, you know, you're going to have to get people in here to learn this because, um, you know, there's a big demand for it, and there's not enough bootmakers to go around. Because I mean, everybody I know who they don't even have to make a great boot. If they make a decent boot, they're covered up with work, you know. And so if you don't start sharing that knowledge, you know, the trade it'll go away, you know. So, but like Clyde and Joe used to tell me all the time, back when they were learning in the 40s, you know, everybody was a custom bootmaker. I mean, there wasn't, Tony Lyman, no Conan, Justin, and all them. They weren't big, huge factories back then. I mean, they were small boot shops, just like all the rest of them were. And so that was, there were lots of bootmakers in every town. And so they really wouldn't teach you, so to speak, how to make boots. You had to kind of be standing over their shoulder and watch. I mean, they wouldn't say a word to you. I mean, you literally learned by watching. I mean, and they didn't want to show you. They didn't want to explain anything to you for fear that you were going to get their job. And so, I think it's changed a lot in that aspect. It had to, or like I say, it would go away.
Wow, that's a huge shift. I'm going to pivot a little bit and bring it into the live chat. Everybody watching right now, feel free to put a question in the live chat if you have a question for Mike. I did get a question through from Carlos about your least favorite material, least favorite leather or style of boot that you're not fond of as far as durability, or will avoid recommending to customers who come in asking you to make a pair of boots. What's the least favorite leather or style to work with?
I really don't have a quote unquote least favorite, but depending on what somebody does, I mean, there are some leathers I would steer them away from. I mean, if they're a ranch cowboy, and they're horseback every day and in brush country and stuff like that, I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend kangaroo or smooth ostrich or something like that, because they're just going to, or like Italian calf, which is really, or baby calf, which is really, really thin and lightweight, because they'll tear it up pretty quick. Those three leathers right there are really, really soft, and they would tear up quick if a ranch cowboy was wearing them, but they are easy to work with, so if it's a new customer, I mean, I've learned my lesson about that too. I mean, I asked them what they do for a living, and then I ask them if they're hard on boots, because if they are hard on them, there are leathers I will steer them away from, and if they're, just hellfire and brimstone that, nope, that's what I want, then I don't want to hear it when you tear it up, because I tried to warn you. Just because it's a handmade boot doesn't mean you can't tear it up. There's just leathers that you don't need to be wearing if you're one of those guys that's hard on stuff, So I don't have a least favorite. I mean, as far as one that's a wrestling match, so to speak, to make, Stingray is kind of a pain, because it just looks like a bunch of little beads, glass beads. And so you'll break a lot of needles trying to sew that Stingray onto the top leather. A lot of needles,
Wow.
They'll hit those beads, and that needle will veer one way or the other, Now they have kind of come up with what they call a shaved finish on that Stingray, which is a whole lot easier to work with than the original stuff that they started off with. But and then another one that's really, really difficult to work with, but you can't tear it up, I don't care how hard you try, is what they call cordovan. And it's just a piece off the butt of the horse. And having it in your hands and feeling of it, I mean, it's a nice, soft, supple leather, but I mean, that piece of leather tells you right off the bat just how bad you want to make a pair of boots out of me, because it's not, I mean, it's a wrestling match from beginning to end. Any leather you get wet, you would think it would be a lot more supple and easier to stretch and pull and last. And, it's not. It's just as difficult wet as it is dry, But once you're done with it, I mean, it's funny. It comes in 4 colors. And all 4 of them are like, it's black, brown, kind of oxblood color, and like caramel candy, but it's almost like a flat black paint or a flat brown paint or a flat oxblood color. But once you get them made, the more you polish them, the nicer they look. And they'll look 5 years from now, they'll look a whole lot nicer and newer than they did the day you got done with them. It's funny how that leather does what it does.
Interesting. That's the one that can pretty much polish and kind of look like a glass or a mirror, right?
Yes. And the more you
Wow.
polish it, the more you polish it, the nicer it looks. So.
Wow. And just got a question in from John here, talking about the two boots that you have right now. What are the style or material that you've made those boots out of for your everyday?
One pair is a pair of black elephants, and the other pair is a pair of black calfskins that I just recently finished back in January. And so those are the two that I have right now. So
Do you like elephant leather?
I do and I haven't worn every leather there is by any stretch of the imagination, but I've made elephant for myself and calf, kangaroo, bull hide, wax calf. And of all those leathers that I've made, I mean, elephant just feels best to me. I've never had a pair of ostrich boots. I've never had a pair of alligator boots. That pair of black alligators is on my bucket list before I leave this world, but I just haven't gotten around to them yet.
All alligator, even the tops too?
Yeah.
Nice.
I would like to. What I would like to do, and I've been invited. I just haven't taken the time to do it. But I'd like to go on an alligator hunt and kill my own alligator, and I know where to send it in Georgia to have it tanned and then get it back and make my own boots. I mean, I'd like to do the whole thing full circle is what I'd like to do, and I will. I just need to take the time to do it.
That would be such a good story.
Yeah.
Such a special pair.
I've actually been to that tannery in Georgia where they tan alligators and crocodiles and stuff. And
American tannery?
Yes, sir. They're in Griffin, Georgia. Really, really nice folks, and they do a really fantastic job on their tanning. I mean, they're about as nice as anybody's as I've ever seen. So, but that's my goal, is to go on alligator hunt and get my own and have them tanned and make myself a pair of boots out of them.
That would be so fun. I can't wait to hear about it if that happens or see the end result. You come up a lot on Ask the Bootmaker. Other bootmakers see you as an inspiration and an influence and a mentor. Do you see yourself as a mentor at all, or as being one of those helping hands in the community?
I'm just a regular guy. I don't see myself as a mentor. I've just been, truth be known, I've probably just been doing it a lot longer than they have. I feel like I've been doing this since I was 2, but anytime somebody asks, I don't mind helping somebody or telling them how I do it, or, because I said this before, bootmaking's not easy. And so if there's a way you can help a guy stay out of a pickle that you've already been there and done that thing, why not? Why not help them avoid that mistake? Because mistakes in bootmaking are costly. When you're learning or you're trying to teach somebody, man, you have to buy leather for them to screw up knowing you're going to throw it in the trash. So, and that adds up. Even if you buy junk, it's still stuff that you have to pay for, knowing they're going to mess it up and throw it in the trash. So I just, I went through that. And like I say, back then there was nobody to ask, and I learned from a lot of mistakes. And so I just feel like if you can help somebody not do that, then why not? That's just the way I look at it. So
that's so cool. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people bring up your work, and the fact that that you are willing to help. In fact, that's what Bill Norden said about you when I had him on a couple of weeks ago from Alabama. He said that you were one of the only people who were willing to help him, and that there's probably other bootmakers that he didn't mention that are just as good, but they weren't willing to help him. So that seems like a great place to be in the community.
Yeah, there's no sense of being a horse's ass.
I'm into that.
You
Love it.
catch a lot more flies with honey than you can with poop.
How about competitions? Where do boot making competitions fall for you? How do you feel about those? And how many winning pairs have you made in the past?
Oh, we have that boot and saddle makers roundup every year in Wichita Falls in October,
Hmm.
and I won every category that I entered, and now I run that contest, so I don't enter anymore. I think that's a conflict of interest. But every category I ever got in, I won, um, and then I was asked to start running it, and I've been running it for, gosh, 10 or 12 years now, I guess. Pretty good long while.
So people are pretty relieved that you're a part of it and not competing anymore. Is that what you're telling me? It's like
No,
Tom Brady owning the NFL.
no, no, not at all. Um, I mean, there's there's quite a few good bootmakers out there, and um, it's hard for me to say who's the best. I mean, I could name 8 or 10 that I feel like are in the upper echelon, you know, and it's not that the rest of them are not. Those 8 or 10 that that I could name off the top of my head, they've just been doing it a long time, and the more you do it, the better you get. So, uh, but on the flip side, I've kind of had to laugh at some of the comments I've got about running the contest. I mean, um, when I competed against some of the legendary guys who've been doing it a long time, there wasn't no watered down contest. I mean, if you wanted to play, make something, put it in there, you know, and you'd get your ass beat, but you would see what you needed to do better. And I mean, I've had people say that we have a journeyman division, which is 15 pair or less, and then after that journeyman division, I mean, you had to go compete against the guys who'd been doing it all their lives. And they'd say, well, we can't compete against Tex Robin or Alan Bell or Eddie Kimmel or Dave Little or or Lee Miller or Lisa Sorrell. We can't compete against them guys. Why? I mean, you got a whole year from today to go home and get a pair of boots made. And if you can't get that pair of boots made in a year, maybe bootmaking ain't your thing. You know, I mean, uh, but I did, just to appease them, start an intermediate division for people who are fresh out of the journeyman category, who don't feel like they can compete against those of us who've done it all our lives. But once if they've won the intermediate division, whatever category they're in, they're not allowed to get in that one anymore. And it's not open for discussion. And if they don't like it, I don't care. I mean, put up or shut up is kind of my attitude about it. I mean, I think that's what's wrong with a lot of things now. Everybody wants a participation trophy. And that's just the biggest bunch of BS I ever heard of in my life.
I hear you.
I mean, if you want to be good at it, work hard at it. I mean, don't half-ass your way through life. If you want to be good, work hard. You work hard, good things will come. So, but I think the competitions are good. I think it's good for the custom boot industry as a whole. Because the more boots you got in the contest, the more everybody that's there can pick up more boots and look at them and see what other people are doing. I mean, there's things that may catch your eye that somebody else does that you don't. You know, uh, there's uh, it's like top stitching, for instance. I mean, I get a lot of compliments on my top stitching, but one thing I don't like anymore, and it's not that it's bad, but so many stitch patterns got those little short points back and forth. They all got some variation of that, and I wanted mine to be different. Just and so pretty much every pattern I have, I try to put real long points on stuff because it's different than everybody else does. And I've had a lot of people say, man, there's something different about your tops. I can't put my finger on it, but they're not like everybody else's. Oh, I know what it is. because I wanted them to be different. And so I have a little different, more unique style of how I draw patterns. Not that I haven't done, a lot of those top stitching patterns with the short points back and forth, the fern leaves and Christmas tree looking stuff, that, or whatever people call it. I don't even know what they call it anymore. I've done them, but it looks like everybody else's. And so I wanted mine to look different. And
Do you consider that your signature on your boots, or do you have another area where you sort of mark it?
No, I don't. Um, I don't consider it a signature, but I just don't want mine to look like everybody else's. um, there's things I do different. I think the top stitching one. I personally like a little longer heel base on a pair of cowboy boots than what most people do. Um, and I kind of got into that aspect of, because I used to make boots for a lot of cutting horse trainers, lots of them. And 30 years ago, everybody rode oxbow stirrups, everybody. And oxbow stirrups were just an inch wide, and they would always put their boots in all the way up to the front of the heel base. Well, next thing you know, you'd see holes in the front of those boot tops all the time, and they couldn't figure out why. Well, I figured out why. It's because the heel bases were too short. And so if you put a little bit longer heel base on there, and you put your foot all the way into that front of that heel base, then the top of your boot's not hitting the top of that stirrup and rubbing a hole in it. And so, it wasn't rocket science. It was just looking at what was causing holes to be rubbed in the front of the tops. And so it's just a little bit of a different look than what everybody else does. Now, very few people ride oxbow stirrups at all anymore. They all ride those wooden nettles, flat bottom stirrups as a general rule, but I still put a long heel base on my boot just because it looks a little different than everybody else's. And it's, and I think if you got a little more heel to stand on, you're not apt to run that boot to the inside or to the outside, and there's a, when I was taught, when you build heels, to set that heel out just a little bit, because the biggest majority of everybody walking runs their boots to the outside, and there's a way when you make them to alleviate that from happening. And so, but I'm not the only one that does that. A lot of good bootmakers do that. It's just, I don't want to call it a secret, but it's a technique we all know, and so a lot of us use it for that reason, just to keep those folks walking in the center of their boots and not running them in or running them out. So.
Love it. Great. Love the attention to detail, and the perspective that you take towards it. It's very refreshing to hear, for sure. I don't want to take up all of your time. You've shared enough with us already. I do have a few more questions for you, just like a quick hit questions from folks in the live chat. And I have one here from Brian Williams. We were talking about the competitions before, and I think that's when he asked this question. Who is your favorite bootmaker?
Now or ever?
Why not ever?
Probably Clyde, and Joe. The two that taught me. In my bootmaking career, I've always been open-minded. I think we're all trying to build a better mousetrap, and so every time somebody has shown me something or suggested something, or I see something, I'll ask them how they do it, and I'll go try it, but I always end up going back to the way I was taught. And I've been asked by, a boot collector or to somebody who's really knowledgeable on boots, who do you think is the best? And I tell them, I can't give you an answer for that, but I can tell you I've tried everything everybody has suggested at one time or another, and I always end up going back to the way I was taught. So it's hard for me to, and it just makes me realize how smart those two were. They were really, really, really good. But, Letty's was also one of those larger custom shops where a lot of boots were made. That and don't get me wrong, it was in no way, form, or fashion like a factory deal, but they had a lot of bootmakers and a lot of boots were made, and so you've seen a whole lot of different ways to do things, and they just kind of put all those different techniques together that worked best for them, the way they wanted to make boots. And so um, there are a few things I have changed in the way I was taught, just because I wanted to and I was able to when I got out on my own. When you work for somebody, you do. When you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do. So. But since I work for myself, I mean, there's some things that I do a little different, not a lot, but like when I worked at Letty's, and learned from Clyde and Joe, we always use the 40 penny nail for a shank in every pair of boots we made. Well, 40 penny nails are hard for me to find, so I use a 60 penny nail, in most of the boots now. I'm able to find 40 penny nails, and I usually use those in the ladies' boots because they're not as big and heavy and just a little lighter weight. But 60 penny nails is what I use in the boots I make, and that's not what I was taught. So and there's just a couple of 3 different things I do. Not big changes, but just a couple. So.
Seems fortunate to start with somebody so great. It seems lucky for sure. Especially seeing him on the television, it seemed like it was meant to be.
I tell people that to this day. I mean, I have to be one of the luckiest guys out there from the 2 guys that I got to learn from. I mean, I really am.
So cool. I got a couple more quick questions for you. One here from Intelligent Owl, and there was another question before about this as well. Your experience with shark leather, is it good for cowboy boots or overrated?
It's good. It's a different type of shark they use now. When I first started, they used tiger shark, and it was a lot heavier and had some sure enough grain to it, and made a really nice boot. But I think sand shark is what they use now. And so when you crimp it and you last it, a lot of that grain comes out. It doesn't have the texture that the tiger shark did. But it's a good leather. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. So it's a good durable leather.
Great. Thanks for the question, guys. And the last question here, which I feel like is a good place for us to end, is from Alicio. He asks, basically, what can you share with people who are thinking to start making boots? Should they start thinking about making boots because they can't find any interest in cowboy boots locally? They can't find something to fit them, so maybe that inspires them. What can you share with people who are interested in maybe trying to do what you do?
If you can, I strongly suggest that you find a repair shop that you can go to work in, because you're going to have pretty much every piece of equipment that you will need to make a pair of boots except for a top stitcher. Or they probably won't have a top stitcher, and they probably won't have a cylinder arm machine or a straight needle, which is what I use to side my boots up with. A lot of shops do have a straight needle, that they stitch soles with, but I was taught to side boots up on straight needle, but I've since switched to a cylinder arm machine because it's just easier for me. But as far as sole stitchers, sanders, learning how to use knives and volume, because there's only, to my knowledge, 2 big custom shops left. I mean, that's Little's in San Antonio and Letty's. And so if you can't get in one of those to where they run a lot of volume and you get to see a lot of volume and do a lot of stuff, it's a really, really slow learning process. So if you can get in a repair shop and learn how to put soles and heels on boots and learn how to use all that equipment, learn how to build heels and shape heels and sand heels and finish, it will just put you years ahead when because if you can do that and then you can find a bootmaker who's willing to teach you that you want to apprentice under, I mean, you will be of some value to that guy right off the bat. Because, when I went to Letty's to learn to make boots, I mean, I could bottom anything, from sewing web to the end of it, I could do. So right off the bat, all they had to do was show me a couple of little different things as to this is how we do things here. And it was, and okay, I can do that. And so, I mean, I earned my keep. I wasn't, um, I wasn't costing them any money because, if you know absolutely nothing, I don't care how much try and want to you have. I mean, until you've been there a while and learn how to do some things, you're not productive. I mean, you're standing around watching because you have to be shown how things are done, you know. And like, I'll go back to the repair shop where I first started. When my first day there, they had me inking the soles and heels and burning the edges and brushing them. Well, we worked Tuesday through Friday and a half day on Saturday. Well, if you stop and think about, at least 25 pair of cowboy boots and almost that many pair of men's shoes a day. Well, by the end of week one, I mean, I had, done the finishing part on 250 pairs of boots and shoes. Heck, I was pretty good at that, you know. And so the next week they backed me up one step, just added one more thing to it. Well, at the end of that week, I'd done 250 pair of those with that extra step. Well, I was pretty good at that, and so if you can find a repair shop that does some volume, that is the quickest path to, if learning how to make good custom made cowboy boots is what you want to do, that's the quickest path to get there.
Such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that with everybody. That is so valuable. Mike, thank you so much for taking this time and being on Ask the Bootmaker today. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to everybody watching right now. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you for asking. It was a pleasure.
Same here. It was awesome. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Everybody watching right now, thank you so much for watching. Mike, can you tell us where people can find out more about you online or maybe call to order a pair of boots?
It's Mike Vaughn, handmadeboots.com, and I have a picture gallery there. The phone number is on there. I post quite a few boots on social media. I say quite a few boots. I mean, I don't post a lot of the same. If I'm making a lot of the same things, I don't post them. But I do post pictures of different steps along the way. Just so people can kind of see the inside of the boot versus just a finished boot. I think that's the process through the boot making is good for people to see. If you can actually be there in the shop and see how it's going together, just see the different steps along the way. And so I do a lot of that, and quite a few other bootmakers do as well. So it's always good to, if you want to look at mine, fine, but I'm not the hear all tell all. I mean, like I say, there's a lot of good guys out there that do really good work. So it's good to look at as much information as you can and as many different techniques as you can. So don't get fixated on one person, because what works for this guy might not work for that guy, but like I say, there's more than one way to skin a cat in this kind of work,
So true. Love it. Thanks again, Mike. And I hope you have a spectacular rest of your day. I really appreciate you taking this time.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You too. All right. We are